I'm 62 years old. And I want you to think about what that means for a second. 62. That's the age where most people my generation start doing the math, the serious math. Not the kind of math you do when you're 35 and optimistic, and you think everything will work itself out eventually. No. I'm talking about the kind of math where you sit at the kitchen table at 11 o'clock at night with a yellow legal pad and a calculator, and you go through every single number, your savings, your Social Security estimate, your monthly expenses, and you ask yourself one question: how long will this actually last? And when I did that math, it didn't look good. If I stay in America, and I've lived here my entire life, I was born in Columbus, Ohio. If I stay here and nothing changes, I've got it maybe 5 years before things get genuinely hard. 5 years. That's not a retirement plan. That's a countdown. And the thing is, it didn't have to be this way. I know exactly where things went wrong. I know the exact moment. I even know the exact number. In late 2013, Bitcoin was trading at around $90 a coin. A friend of mine, Dale sat across from me at a diner in Columbus, and he said, "Gary, I'm telling you, put $10,000 into this. Just 10,000. That's it." And I said no. I said no because I thought it was a scam. I said no because I didn't understand it. I said no because $10,000 felt like a lot of money. To gamble on something I couldn't hold in my hands, I said no. And now, well, now I'm sitting here wondering if I should leave the country. That's what saying no cost me. And I want to tell you the whole story because it's not just about Bitcoin. It's about every decision that came before it and every decision that came after. It's about who I was at 45 and who I am now at 62. And honestly, I don't even know how to end this story yet. That's the part I need your help with. But we'll get to that. Let's start from the beginning. My name is Gary Whitfield. I grew up in a working class family in Columbus, Ohio. My father worked at a manufacturing plant his whole life. My mother was a bookkeeper for a small insurance company. We weren't poor, but we weren't comfortable either. We were the kind of family where money was always in the background. Always a quiet, low-level hum of stress. The heat stays on, but you don't talk about how close it came to night. The car gets fixed, but everyone's a little tense for a week after. You know the kind. I think growing up like that did two things to me at the same time. It made me responsible with money, but it also made me careful, maybe too careful. I graduated from Ohio State in 1985 with a degree in electrical engineering. Not the most exciting story, but it was a solid degree. I got a job with a mid-sized manufacturing firm outside Columbus about 8 months after graduation. And for the next 30 years, I basically did what I was supposed to do. I showed up, I worked hard, I moved up slowly, I saved money. By the time I was in my late 30s, I was a senior electrical engineer, making about $92,000 a year. By my mid-40s, I was in a department management role. Peak salary was around $114,000. Not Silicon Valley money, but very solid for Columbus, Ohio. I married my wife, Sandra, in 1991. We had 2 kids, our son Marcus, born in 93, and our daughter Elise, born in 96. We bought a 4-bedroom house in a suburb of Columbus in 1997 for $218,000. It was a good life. I mean that honestly, not in a sad looking back kind of way. It was genuinely a good life while we were living it. Sandra worked part-time as a dental hygienist until the kids were in middle school, then went back full-time. Between the two of us at peak years, we were bringing in somewhere around $160,000 a year combined. We lived well within our means. I maxed out my 401k contributions most years. We had a joint brokerage account where we'd put a few $100s a month. We had the kids' college funds, 529 plans, modest but consistent. By 2010, when I was 46 years old, our total investable net worth was around $840,000. That included the 401k, the brokerage account, and a small IRA I'd opened in my early 30s. The house was worth about $310,000 at that point. We owed maybe $90,000 left on the mortgage, $840,000 in investments, $220,000 in home equity. That's a genuinely comfortable position to be in at 46, and I was proud of it. Maybe too proud. There's a certain kind of confidence that comes from doing everything right for 20 years. You start to believe the trajectory will just continue. Theoretically, you look at the numbers and you project forward and you think, I'm going to be fine. We are going to be absolutely fine. I had a plan, retire at 65 with approximately $2 million in combined savings and investments. Take Social Security at 67, live modestly but comfortably. That was the plan. A very reasonable, very achievable, very boring plan. And then 2011 happened. That was the year Sandra and I started having problems. I'm not going to get into all the details because honestly, some of it is still painful and some of it is private. But here's the short version. Sandra and I had grown apart in the way that couples do when they spend 20 years focused on the logistics of raising children and building a life together. And somewhere in there, forget to stay connected to each other as people. We went to counseling for about a year. I think we both tried. I really do believe that. But by the fall of 2012, we agreed to separate. The divorce was finalized in March of 2013, and that restructured everything. We sold the house, split the proceeds, my share of the home equity, after realtor fees and closing costs came out to about $94,000. The investment accounts were divided. Just by the time the settlement was done, I walked away with approximately $410,000 in my 401k, $68,000 in the brokerage account, $31,000 in the IRA, and that $94,000 from the house sale. Total liquid net worth, roughly $603,000. I was 48 years old, newly divorced, renting an apartment for the first time in over 15 years, and trying to figure out what the second half of my life was going to look like. $603,000. That sounds like a lot, and it is. It was. But it was also a lot less than where I'd been 12 months earlier, and the divorce itself cost me about $22,000 in legal fees, and I had 2 kids to help through college. Marcus was already at Ohio State. Elise would start 2 years later, and I was starting over in a 1-bedroom apartment, eating dinner alone, staring at a ceiling that wasn't mine. So that's the context for what comes next, because that is the emotional state I was in when Dale Kowalski sat across from me in a diner and told me about Bitcoin. Dale and I had been friends since college. He was never the most financially sophisticated person I knew, but he was curious. He was always reading things, finding things, getting excited about new ideas. Sometimes those ideas were good. Sometimes they were terrible. We'd grab breakfast every couple of months just to catch up. This was October 2013. I remember it clearly because I just signed a lease on a new apartment, a slightly bigger one finally, and I was feeling cautiously optimistic for the first time since the divorce. We ordered food. We talked about the kids, his and mine, and then he leaned forward across the table and said, "Gary, have you heard of Bitcoin?" I told him I'd heard the word, but I didn't really know what it was. He explained it to me, or tried to anyway. It was a digital currency. It lived on a network called a blockchain. No government controlled it, no bank controlled it. The supply was limited. Only 21 million coins would ever exist. And the price, right now, we said, it's around $90 a coin. But Gary, at the beginning of this year, January, it was $13. He let the land $13 to $90 in under a year. And I think it's going to go a lot higher, Yoshwart, he said. I put in $8,000 in the summer. I have over 50 coins. I did the mental math. 50 coins at $90. That was $4,500. You've almost lost half your money, I said. He shook his head. Motion, No, Gary, I bought them when it was around 150 because there was a spike. But that's not the point. The point is the technology and where it's going. This is the internet of money. And here's where I want to be really honest. Because the easy version of the story is to say I didn't understand Bitcoin and left it alone, and that was the mistake. But that's not entirely true. Something in what Dale said caught me. Not the get-rich-quick part. I had been careful my whole life about get-rich-quick things. It was the limited supply part. I was an engineer. And as an engineer, the concept of a provably scarce digital asset that no single entity could inflate or devalue, I actually understood that. On some level, I went home and I read about it for 3 days. I read the original Satoshi Nakamoto white paper. I read forums. I found Reddit communities. I watched YouTube videos that barely had 1,000 views. And at the end of 3 days, I had a decision to make. My honest internal read was, this is either going to be worth nothing, or it's going to be worth something I cannot fully imagine. Those were genuinely the two possibilities I could see. At $90 a coin, I had been thinking about putting in $10,000. Let's chase this out. That would have bought me approximately 111 Bitcoin, $10,000. I had $600,000 in savings. $10,000 was less than 2% of my net worth. It was, by any definition of the word, a manageable risk. But I was 48 years old, freshly divorced, emotionally shaken, financially cautious by nature, and carrying the memory of a father who worked his whole life in a factory and never had anything to show for chasing things. I thought about what would happen if I put $10,000 into this thing and it went to zero. That $10,000 was gone, period, no recovery. And I thought about the fact that I was already behind where I wanted to be for retirement. I thought about Marcus's last year of college tuition. I thought about a lease starting in 2 years. I thought about everything that could go wrong, and I said no. Not dramatically, not with a big proclamation. I just let it go. I told Dale the next time I saw him that I decided it wasn't for me. He nodded, didn't push, and that was that. Within 6 months, Bitcoin went from $90 to over $1,100, $1,100. By December 2013, just 2 months after that diner conversation, the price had gone up over 1,200%. My hypothetical 111 coins would have been worth over $120,000 on a $10,000 investment. I watched it happen from the sidelines, and I told myself what everyone tells themselves in those moments. It's a bubble. It'll collapse. I was right to stay out. And then it did collapse. By early 2015, Bitcoin was down to around $200. And for a while, for a few years, honestly, I felt vindicated. See, it was a bubble. That feeling lasted until about 2017. What happened in 2017 changed the way I thought about that decision forever. Let me pause here and tell you about the years between 2013 and 2017. Because this story isn't just about Bitcoin. The Bitcoin decision was the first domino, but dominoes don't mean much unless you understand the full line. After the divorce, I rented that apartment for about 2 years before I bought a smaller house. 2 bedrooms, nice neighborhood. It paid $307,000 for it in 2015. Put $60,000 down. Took a mortgage on the rest. That was fine. That was a reasonable, normal decision. But here's what was happening emotionally during those years that I don't think I fully acknowledged at the time. I was lonely. Sandra and I had divided our social life along with everything else. Couples, friends, shared activities, that whole world had split. I had work colleagues. I had Dale. I had a few other friends. But coming home to an empty house every night after 22 years of family life, it does something to you. And in 2015, I met a woman named Patricia. She was 50, recently widowed, warm, funny, attractive. We met at a fundraising event for Marcus's college alumni chapter. I was there as a parent volunteer. We dated for about 8 months. And then, and I want to be careful about how I say this because Patricia was not a bad person. She really wasn't. But we moved too fast. She moved in with me in early 2016. And with that came a kind of lifestyle expansion that I had not really planned for. Patricia was not extravagant, but she had a certain standard of living, better restaurants, more travel, nicer things around the house, and I went along with it because I was happy, genuinely happy for the first time in years. And happiness makes you spend. I'm not blaming her. I want to be clear about that. I made every choice willingly. I just wasn't doing the math the same way I used to. In 2016, I spent probably $18,000 more than I had budgeted for. Not catastrophic, but meaningful. And I dipped into the brokerage account twice that year for things that weren't emergencies. Meanwhile, my 401k contributions had dropped. Not stopped. I was still contributing, but I had scaled back when I took the mortgage, and I hadn't scaled back up. These are all small things individually. Together, they were starting to change the trajectory. Now, 2017, I want to tell you what it felt like to watch Bitcoin from the outside in 2017. In January of that year, Bitcoin was around $1,000. By April, it was around $1,200. By June, almost $3,000. By September, over $4,000. By November, almost $8,000. And by December 2017, Bitcoin hit nearly $20,000 a coin. $20,000, my 111 coins. Remember those? The hypothetical ones from 2013 would have been worth $2,220,000. $2 million on $10,000. I remember the exact moment I did that calculation. I was sitting at my kitchen table on a Sunday morning in December 2017. The coffee was hot. Patricia was still asleep. It was one of those quiet, gray Ohio mornings. I typed it into my phone calculator, 111 times 19,800, and the number came up. I sat there for a long time. I want to be honest about what that felt like. It felt like grief, real grief, the kind you feel when something is gone and it is never coming back, and you know it. I closed the calculator app, I poured more coffee, and I went back to reading the news because what else do you do? But here's what I also want to tell you. After 2017, I started paying much closer attention to the investment world in a different way than before. Before, I had been a set-it-and-forget-it investor. Index funds, 401k, steady contributions, don't panic, classic, sensible, boring strategy. After 2017, I started reading more, watching more, thinking more about what I might be missing. And that attention, it made me want to do something. I think this is an important thing to understand about financial decision making. Watching a massive opportunity pass you by doesn't make you more cautious, it makes you more hungry. In 2018, I made my first significant investment mistake, not Bitcoin, not crypto at all, actually. It was a cannabis company. This was 2018, when marijuana legalization was spreading across states. And there was a genuine business rationale for investing in cannabis companies. It wasn't purely speculative. There were real companies with real revenues and real growth trajectories. I put $35,000 into 2 cannabis stocks through my brokerage account. Not retirement money, not my 401k, regular brokerage account funds. And for about 4 months, it looked like I was right. I was up almost 40%. On paper, I had $50,000 where $35,000 used to be. And then the cannabis market corrected hard. By the end of 2018, I had lost roughly $22,000 of my $35,000 investment. Total realized loss when I finally sold $22,000. I told myself, okay, that was a lesson. Back to the boring strategy. But I was starting to chip at the foundation. In 2019, Patricia and I broke up, not dramatically. We had just run our course. The relationship had been good for both of us for a time, but we wanted different things going forward. She moved out in April of 2019, and I was alone again. I was 55 years old, living in a house that suddenly felt very large, and looking at investment account balances that were lower than they should have been. My 401k at that point had recovered with the market and was sitting at approximately 680,000. My brokerage account was at about 112,000, down from where it should have been because of the cannabis losses and the 2016 overspending. IRA, about 62,000. Total investable, roughly 854,000, which sounds fine, but I had planned to have over $1 million by this age. I was behind. And when you're 55 and behind, you don't think, I have time to catch up slowly. You think, I need to do something. That thought, I need to do something, is maybe the most dangerous thought in personal finance. I know that now. I didn't fully know it then. And then 2020 came. And what happened in March of that year seemed, for about 3 weeks, like the worst thing that had ever happened to my retirement plan, until it became something else entirely. Let me tell you about the COVID crash. March 2020. The market fell approximately 34% in about 5 weeks. My 401k dropped from approximately 740,000 to around 490,000 in the space of a month. $250,000 of paper wealth gone in a month. Now, and I want to be precise here, I knew intellectually that market corrections are part of investing, and that the right move historically has always been to stay the course. I had been through 2008. I knew this. But I was 56 years old. I was looking at a retirement that had already been compromised by a divorce and some bad decisions, and I was watching $250,000 evaporate. I didn't sell. I want to give myself credit for that. I did not sell in the crash. What I did do was stop contributing. I was working from home. My company had done salary cuts across the board. I took a 12% cut in April 2020, and I told myself I'd restart contributions when things stabilized. Things stabilized faster than anyone expected. By August 2020, the market had recovered. By the end of 2020, it was significantly higher than it had been before the crash. But I hadn't restarted my contributions. The salary cut had ended in September. But I just hadn't gotten around to adjusting the contributions back. I kept meaning to. And 1 month became 3 months, became 6 months. Became almost a full year of reduced contributions. That gap, that year, cost me, in lost compounding over time, probably $60,000 to $80,000 in future retirement value. Not because the market crashed, because I was slow to respond when it recovered. And then crypto came back. 2020 and into 2021, the Bitcoin started climbing again. In January 2020, it was around $7,000. By December 2020, it was $30,000. By April 2021, $63,000. And I watched it. And I felt the hunger again. But this time I had convinced myself I was going to be smarter. Not Bitcoin, that ship had sailed. But I had started reading about altcoins, about Ethereum, about DeFi, about yield farming. I know how that sounds now, I know. But I want you to understand the psychology. I wasn't some naive person who didn't understand money. I was a 56-year-old engineer with 30 years of financial experience. But I was behind on my retirement target. I was alone. And I had just watched in real time as crypto exploded again. The voice in my head wasn't saying you're going to get rich. The voice in my head was saying you cannot afford to miss another one. That's a very different voice, and it is a very dangerous one. In the spring of 2021, I moved $45,000 from my brokerage account into crypto. Ethereum, $20,000. Solana, $12,000. A basket of smaller altcoins, $13,000. For about 4 months, I was up significantly. My $45,000 had grown to just over $110,000. And I want to be very honest here. I did not take profits. I told myself I would. I made mental plans about where I'd sell. If it doubles from here, I'll sell half. But it kept going up. And every time it went up, the sell target moved up too, and then it started going down. By January 2022, crypto had entered a brutal bear market. By the summer of 2022, my position was worth approximately $12,000. I had turned $45,000 into $12,000, a loss of $33,000. I sold everything. $33,000 gone. At this point, I need to add up the numbers for you. Because when I finally sat down and really did it, the total was worse than I had let myself believe. Let me do the tally right here, because you deserve to see it. The divorce settlement in 2013 had left me with approximately $603,000. Let's track what happened. The cannabis investment loss in 2018, minus $22,000. The reduced 401k contributions during COVID, approximately $60,000 to $80,000 in lost future value. Let's call it $70,000. The crypto loss in 2021 to 2022, minus $33,000. And this doesn't account for the lifestyle inflation with Patricia in 2016. The $18,000 over budget year and the brokerage withdrawals. Call that $30,000 total. That's roughly $155,000 in preventable losses and misted gains. On top of that, the general market performed well from 2013 to 2023. If I had simply put that original $603,000 into a basic index fund and not touched it, no crypto, no cannabis, no withdrawals, Hanger, at a historical average annual return of roughly 7%, by 2023, that money would have grown to approximately $1,900,000, almost $2 million. Instead, by mid-2022, my total investable net worth was 401k, approximately $720,000. Brokerage, approximately $48,000. IRA, approximately $78,000. Total, roughly $846,000, which sounds like a lot. And I'm not saying I'm destitute. I'm not. But let me show you what $846,000 means for retirement in America in 2023. I sat down in the fall of 2022 and did what I should have done every year. A real honest, sober retirement projection. Here are the numbers I used. I was 58 at the time. I plan to retire at 65, 7 years away. At my current savings rate, I projected my total investable assets at 65 would be approximately $1,100,000. Social Security, based on my earnings history, would give me approximately $2,400 a month if I claimed at 67. So the plan as I saw it, retirement at 65, spent us down to $1.1 million over time, add Social Security at 67. The standard rule of thumb is the 4% withdrawal rule, but by meaning you can sustainably withdraw 4% of your portfolio annually without running out of money over a 30-year retirement. 4% of $1,100,000 is $44,000 a year. That's $3,600 a month from savings plus Social Security $2,400 a month. Total monthly income in retirement, approximately $6,000 a month, $72,000 a year. Now, what does it cost to live as a single person in Columbus, Ohio in 2023? My mortgage payment, $1,800 a month. I had about 14 years left on the mortgage. Health insurance after retirement, before Medicare at 65. This was the brutal one. Private insurance for a 63 or 64-year-old male, easily $900 to $1,200 a month. Property taxes, $420 a month. Utilities, $300 a month. Food, $600 a month. Car, I had a paid-off car, but maintenance, insurance, gas, $300 a month. Medications, I'm on 2 prescriptions. About $200 a month with Medicare Part D. That's approximately $4,500 a month in baseline fixed and semi-fixed costs before any travel, before any entertainment, before any home repairs. before any help to the kids if they ever need it, before any unexpected medical expenses, and healthcare after 65 with Medicare and a supplement plan, still probably $400 to $600 a month. The math was tight, very tight. And that was assuming the market cooperated, assuming no major health crisis, assuming no home emergency, assuming no prolonged market downturn in the early years of retirement, what financial planners call sequence of returns risk. Let me tell you what scared me most. It wasn't the number itself, it was the margin. If everything goes right, every year, every market year, every health year, I'm fine. I'm not rich, but I'm fine. But if anything goes wrong, if the market has a bad 4-year run right after I retire, if I have a significant health event at 67, if the house needs a new roof and an HVAC system in the same year, the margin disappears fast. And when the margin disappears and you're 72 years old, you don't get to go back to work easily. You don't get a do-over. That is when the word broke stops being a financial term and starts being a description of a life. I thought about my father. He worked in that plant for 37 years. He retired at 68. He died at 74. 6 years of retirement. He didn't die broke, but he died worried about money. Almost every conversation in those last years came back to money somehow. I used to think that was a failure of imagination on his part. Now I understand it differently. When you don't have enough margin, money occupies your mind constantly. It's not a character flaw. It's the natural result of not having enough cushion. I don't want to die the way my father spent his last years. Now let me tell you about the Bitcoin calculation, because I need you to understand what I know now. In October 2013, I almost bought 111 Bitcoin at $90 a coin. In November 2021, Bitcoin hit its all-time high of approximately $69,000 a coin. 111 Bitcoin at $69,000. That is $7,659,000. $7,659,000. Now, yes, I understand I would not have held from 2013 to 2021. Nobody does that. I would have sold somewhere along the way. Maybe at $1,000, maybe at $5,000, maybe at $20,000 in December 2017. But even at $20,000, the 2017 peak, that would have been $2,220,000. On $10,000, my retirement would look completely different. My life would look completely different. And instead, I'm sitting here at 62 doing math on a yellow legal pad wondering if I can afford to stay in the country where I was born. Because here's the part of this story I haven't told you yet. The part where I realized that the answer to my retirement problem might not be working harder or investing differently. The answer might be geography. I want to tell you how I first seriously started thinking about leaving America. It was the summer of 2023. I was at a cookout at my friend Dale's house. Same Dale from the diner, yes. And there was a couple there I'd never met. Tom and Linda, both retired, both around 68 to 69. Tom had worked in insurance his whole career. Linda had been a school administrator. They'd retired to Chiang Mai, Thailand 2 years prior. Now, I'd heard of people doing this. I'd read an article or two about it. But, I'd always filed it under interesting thing other people do without really thinking about it for myself. But something about talking to Tom and Linda in person was different. These were not hippies. They were not adventurers. They were not tech-forward digital nomads. They were people exactly like me. Tom was from Indiana. Linda grew up in Michigan. Between them, they had about $950,000 in retirement savings and Social Security. In Chiang Mai, Thailand, they were living in a 2-bedroom furnished apartment in a nice part of the city. Their rent, $750 a month. Full month of groceries for 2 people, around $300. Health care, private international health insurance for 2 seniors, about $450 a month combined. Dining out, entertainment, Travel within Southeast Asia, about $600 a month combined. Their total monthly expenses, approximately $2,300 for two people. I want you to sit with that number for a moment. $2,300 a month for two people, including rent, food, healthcare, entertainment. In Columbus, Ohio, my personal monthly baseline expenses were $4,500 alone. Their combined expenses in Thailand were almost half of my solo expenses in Ohio. I started researching obsessively after that cookout. Not just Thailand, everywhere. The Philippines, Mexico, specifically places like Mérida, Mexico City, Puerto Vallarta, Vietnam, Da Nang, Hoi An, Ho Chi Minh City, Portugal, Colombia, Medellin, Costa Rica. I spent about 4 months doing serious detailed research, building spreadsheets, joining expat forums, reading financial blogs aimed at retirees abroad, watching YouTube channels run by Americans living in these countries. And what I found was illuminating. Let me give you the numbers I came up with for 3 countries in particular. The Philippines, specifically Cebu City, or Dumaguete monthly rent for a comfortable 1-bedroom or 2-bedroom apartment, $400 to $700. Food, mix of local markets and occasional Western restaurants, $250 to $350. Healthcare, private international health insurance for a single 62-year-old American male, approximately $220 to $280 a month for solid coverage. Utilities, phone, internet, about $90 to $130. Transportation, $60 to $100. Entertainment, leisure, incidentals, $150 to $250. Realistic total monthly budget, approximately $1,200 to $1,800. And the Philippines has a specific retirement visa, the SRRV, that makes it relatively easy for Americans to establish long-term residency. English is widely spoken. The culture has warm historical ties to America. Cost of living outside Manila is extremely affordable. Negatives, tropical climate, some infrastructure challenges. Healthcare quality varies significantly by city. Some political instability in certain regions. Vietnam, specifically Da Nang or Hoi An monthly rent for a modern 1-bedroom apartment, $350 to $550. Food, $200 to $300. Healthcare insurance, similar to the Philippines, $200 to $270. Utilities and internet, $80 to $110. Transportation, $50 to $80. Entertainment and incidentals, $150 to $200. Realistic total monthly budget, $1,100 to $1,500. Extraordinarily affordable. Beautiful coastline, excellent food, rapidly improving infrastructure. Negatives, language barrier is more significant, less English than the Philippines. Long-term visa situation for Americans is more complicated. Vietnam does not have a formal retirement visa. You essentially do visa runs or apply for longer tourist extensions. Political system is not democracy. That matters to some people. Mexico, specifically Mérida, Oaxaca, or Puerto Vallarta monthly rent for a comfortable apartment, $500 to $900 depending on city and neighborhood. Food, $300 to $450. Healthcare, international health insurance, roughly $250 to $320 a month. Additionally, Mexico has good private hospital infrastructure, and many Americans cross for dental and medical care already. Utilities, $100 to $150. Transportation, $80 to $120. Entertainment and incidentals, $200 to $300. Realistic total monthly budget, $1,500 to $2,200. Culturally very accessible. Close to the United States. I could be back in Ohio for under $300 on a flight. Food is exceptional. Weather in places like Merida is warm year-round. Large expat communities. Negatives. Security concerns vary significantly by region. Some areas are genuinely dangerous. Needs careful research. The current U.S.-Mexico political environment creates some uncertainty. Now let me tell you what the math looks like for me personally. If I retire at 63, I can do this because I'd access my 401k penalty-free at 59 and a half, and I move to a place like Cebu in the Philippines or Da Nang in Vietnam. My total monthly expenses could be around $1,400 to $1,600 a month. My Social Security at 67 would be approximately $2,400 a month. That means between 63 and 67, the gap years before Social Security, I withdraw from my portfolio $1,600 a month, $19,200 a year. Over 4 years, approximately $77,000 drawn down, compared to the $1,100,000 I project to have at retirement. That's a 7% drawdown before Social Security even begins. Once Social Security kicks in at $2,400 a month, I am no longer drawing down my portfolio. I'm actually accumulating. My monthly income would exceed my monthly expenses by approximately $800 to $1,000 a month. My retirement savings would grow, not shrink. I could travel. I could visit Marcus and Elise. I could live a genuinely comfortable, pleasant life. Not a rich life, but a life where money is not a constant, low-level hum of anxiety. And in America, in Columbus, Ohio, the math runs the other direction. I draw down the portfolio every year. Healthcare costs increase as I age. Property taxes increase. The house needs things. Best case, I make it to my late 70s without a crisis. If I live to 85, which is realistic, my mother is 81 and still healthy. I could outlive the money. That is not a hypothetical I can afford to be casual about. So here's where I am. 62 years old, 850-something thousand in retirement savings. A paid-down mortgage on a house worth about $385,000 now. Marcus is doing well. He's in his early 30s, has his own life, his own family. He doesn't need me financially, but I'd be farther away. Elise is 27, living in Chicago, building her career. We're close. She calls me every Sunday. If I move to Southeast Asia or Mexico, I won't be there when things happen. Not immediately, not easily. And I don't know how that sits with me. I also want to tell you something I don't say out loud very often. I'm not entirely sure the Bitcoin regret is really about Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin became the symbol for something bigger. It became the symbol for every time I chose safety over possibility. Every time I listened to the cautious voice in my head instead of the curious one. Every time I let fear make the decision instead of reason. I didn't miss Bitcoin because I was stupid. I missed it because I was afraid. And I have been afraid a lot. After the divorce, after the empty apartment, after watching the market crash in 2020, after selling crypto at a loss. Fear has made a lot of my decisions, and the question I'm sitting with now is moving abroad the brave decision or the fearful one? Am I running toward a better life, or am I running away from one that didn't go the way I planned? I genuinely don't know. Here's what I do know. If I stay in America as planned, I have a tight but viable retirement if nothing goes wrong. If I go abroad, Philippines, Vietnam, Mexico, I have a genuinely comfortable retirement with real financial security and growing savings even after I stop working. The financial argument for leaving is close to overwhelming. The emotional argument for staying is also real. I am 62 years old. I grew up in Ohio. My kids are here. My friends are here. My whole life has been here. And a version of me that is practical and unsentimental says, Gary, the numbers are the numbers. Sentiment is expensive when you're on a fixed income. And another version of me says, you've already given up enough. You don't have to give up your home too. And so I find myself with 3 paths. Path 1, stay in Columbus. Don't move. Keep the house. Retire at 65 as planned. Live carefully within the budget. Hope nothing goes catastrophically wrong. Accept the margin is thin and try not to think about it too much. Path 2, sell the house. Take the roughly $250,000 to $270,000 in equity after paying off the remaining mortgage. Move to Mexico, specifically Merida. Close enough to fly back easily. Big expat community, good health care, culturally accessible. Use the house equity as an additional cushion. Retire at 63. Path 3, move to Southeast Asia, Philippines, or Vietnam. Lower cost of living, maximum financial security. Much farther from the kids. Significant lifestyle adjustment, but genuinely comfortable for the rest of my life, regardless of what the market does. I've been sitting with these 3 options for about 4 months now, and I've talked to a few people. My financial advisor, who is honestly pretty neutral about it and says the numbers support moving, but it's ultimately a personal decision. Marcus, who said, and I'm paraphrasing it, but Dad, if it makes financial sense, do it. We'll visit. You can come back. Elise, who got very quiet on the phone and then said she'd support whatever I decided, but I could hear that she didn't love the idea, and I keep going back and forth. Every time I think I've decided, something shifts. I walk around my neighborhood on a Sunday morning and I think I can't leave this. And then I do the math again and I think I can't afford not to. I'm telling you all of this whole story, every embarrassing decision, every missed opportunity, every number I'm not proud of, because I genuinely want to know what you think. Not because I'll do whatever the internet says, but because sometimes the clearest perspective comes from people who are slightly outside your situation. People who can see the shape of the thing without being caught inside it the way I am. So here's what I'm asking you. If you were in my position, 62 years old, $850,000 in savings, a house with equity, 2 adult kids in America, a retirement budget that works abroad and gets tight at home, what would you do? Would you stay because home is home and no spreadsheet should make that decision? Would you go to Mexico, close enough to come back, far enough to save the money? Would you go further, Philippines, Vietnam, for maximum financial peace? Or is there a 4th option I'm not seeing because I'm 52 days from making a decision? And right now, on a quiet Tuesday night in Columbus, Ohio, with the heat on and a cup of coffee going cold on the table beside me, I honestly don't know what the right answer is. I think about that at diner sometimes, the coffee, Dale's face across the table, $90, 111 coins. Gary, I'm telling you, I said no. I wonder sometimes what the version of me that said yes looks like. It's where he lives, whether he's happy, whether he still misses things he can't get back. I think he probably does. I think that's just what being human feels like. You make a decision, you live with it. And sometimes late at night, you sit with the other version of the story and you feel the weight of it. The weight doesn't have to mean regret forever. It can mean wisdom if you let it. I'm trying to let it mean wisdom. Don't you? I'll let you know what I decide.